Right. Sad here knowing Frank Jones is down here. Place left. Oh, we're getting ready?
Yes.
Hi, boys and girls. How are we all doing tonight? First, we're going to start this evening by honoring the folks who have been our wait service staff here for the past few days. Not only the wait staff, but the folks who are cleaning our rooms, our bus drivers, the front desk staff. It's been a fabulous time here, and so if we could, we'll have our wait staff. What are your hands now?
Is this where the fake Alaska
Ken
comes out?
Ritucci could make his way to the front here. He will lead us in a blessing.
Let us pray. For what we are about to receive, let us be truly thankful to those who planted the crops, to those who cultivated the fields, to those who gathered the harvest. For what we are about to receive, let us be truly thankful. Those who prepared it and those who served it. In this festivity, let us remember too, those who have no festivity, those who cannot share this plenty, those whose lives are more affected than our own by war, oppression, and exploitation, those who are hungry, sick, and cold. In sharing this meal, let us be truly thankful for the good things we have and for warm hospitality and for this good company. Amen.
Amen.
Gentlemen, we are about to start tonight's program.
What? You know what? You know what?
Number one, did you folks enjoy tonight's dinner?
Yes.
You know, coming from the square dance world as we do is quite a treat to be able to eat a piece of cake on a glass plate. And I know it's quite a
Eat a
treat
piece
for our
of cake on a
traveling
glass
full-time
plate.
square dance scholars to be able to eat a meal that's not wrapped up in paper, that's eaten by hand. So that's quite a nice treat to them as well. We're going to take a moment here, and we are going to offer some introductions of some of our board members here. And it is a nice treat, wouldn't you agree, to have our board members now sitting down amongst us, so we have a chance to... We're going to depart from the usual stand and sit back down just a bit, and rather than holding your applause for the entire group, we'll probably do this in segments if you don't mind. And so as I call your name, we'd like you to stand and remain standing. It'll be a short period of time, I promise. First off, Clark, Baker, and Marion. Where are we? Clark and Marion Baker. Please stand. Be identified. Please hold your applause for now.
Forever.
Bill Lloyd, also the editor of American Square Dance Magazine. Walt Burr. Cal Campbell and Judy. Hello. Wow. There be sound.
I thought it was just Judy.
And the next person I'm about
Got
to
an
introduce,
amazing name, you do.
I'm sometimes struck by the parallels we have within our own industry and other entertainment industries. And so when I think of, for example, Wade Driver, would you go ahead and stand? You know, within the entertainment industry, he's like our version of Quincy Jones. He's the music production master. A nice round of applause for these folks. We thank you. We'll go ahead and be seated now. Bill Harrison person, would you please stand and be identified? Mike Hogan, also on the board. Jerry Justin. By the way, Mike is our freshman, serving his freshman term this year.
Yes.
And here's a name that I'm struck by the parallels to the entertainment industry by this next name. And when I think of this name, I think of people like in the entertainment industry, Britney Spears and Lindsay Lohan. So Patty Green. Absolutely nothing to do with Patty Green, but nice round of applause for these folks. Thank you very much. You may have a seat. Kayla Jones, Vernon Jones. One has his own sense of priorities up here. It's my program, it's my microphone. Vernon and Kayla Jones. Hey, let's see, John Marshall. I consider this next gentleman a senior statesman. He's been on the board, selflessly serving for 4 decades, and that is Jim Mayo. Jim and Joanne Mayo, would you please stand and be identified? Deborah Carol Jones and John Jones. You know, the entertainment industry has Blake Shelton and Miranda Lambert, Beyonce and Jay-Z. We have Deborah and John. And the pop world can eat their heart out. A nice round of applause for these folks. Bear Miller and Tom Miller, no relation. Bob Pointer and Ann, would you please stand and be identified? And Dottie Welch, please stand and be identified. These folks are again our board members, and let's have a nice round of applause for these kind folks. We move on to the executive committee. The executive committee, the 5 people who are really in charge of the smoothest operations we have here at CALLERLAB. And again, I'm reminded of people within the entertainment industry, like Nancy Pelosi and Harry Reid and John Boehner and Mitch McConnell, and so to that end we have Betsy Gada, please stand and be identified. Betsy and Roy Gada. Betsy and Roy bring a new meaning to true relationships between the square dance and the round dance world. As you may know, Roy is chairman, correct, of CALLERLAB. So does that mean you get a cut rate on the round dance cure at your dances now? Denver. Eric Hennerla, please stand and be identified. Tim Mariner and Ken Ritucci, our 4 executive board members. And chairman of the board, Barry Clasper and Ken. Our student leaders. I hope you agree with me that these folks are a very attractive bunch of people, aren't they? They look nice. They're very well put together. They're well dressed.
I would like some more.
They're the whole package, as we say. You represent us very well, and we are honored to have it here. A nice round of applause for all of our board members. Half-Century Awards now, and to make the intro, oh, I'm sorry, I digress. I missed a page. The most important people of our convention, and the most important people of CALLERLAB, the home office staff. As I call your name, please stand and remain standing for the next 20 minutes. Galen and Donna Shermer, the Executive Director. There's a misspelling here, Mr. secretary. Judy and Dennis, please stand. Judy and Dennis is Grossnickel, correct?
Yes.
We're glad you are here. The Hollenbergers, Tom and Cindy Hollenberger, and a nice round of applause for these hard-working individuals. Presenting the half-century award certificate will be Melton Luttrell. And we'll have Melton come on up here as he makes his way up here. I'd like to introduce Melton by saying that he started calling in 1949. He joined CALLERLAB in 1974. He has attended the very first convention and has been at every single convention since. He's a life member of CALLERLAB, a milestone recipient, and a wonderful gentleman, a true country gentleman. This is Melton Luttrell.
Thank you very much. I'm going to depart from the script just for a moment, if I might. Many of you asked about Sue, and as some of you are aware and the others are not, she's suffering some health issues at this point in time, which caused me to be late for this year's convention. But those of you who have called with your prayers and so forth, I'm appreciative, and I know she is too, and I'm praying for a full recovery, and maybe that'll happen. Well, I done stumbled right out of the gate, didn't I? It's hard to read these things. Half-century certificates are awarded each year for those people that have been calling for 50 or more years. At the Baltimore Convention in 1986, I believe it was the first of those awards that have been awarded every year since then. But a total of 192 CALLERLAB members have received this half-century award. 88 of those are current CALLERLAB members. And of those 88, 19 are present at this convention. Now then, I'd like for those 19 to stand as I call your name alphabetically. And I am hopeful that you'll hold your applause until it's all over, as they say, and that you'll remain standing. This is in alphabetical order. Don Beck from Massachusetts. The damn Yankee. 51 years. Hello, Don. Leather tie. Mike Callahan from New York. Has to be an Irishman. For 55 years. Calvin Campbell from Colorado. One of the original Pappy Shaw people. Nice to have you and Judy here. For 60 years. Randy Daugherty from Arizona, who is best known for another Daugherty. 51 years. Wade Driver. You know, I'll never understand this. Wade Driver graduated from Annapolis and entered into naval intelligence. And now he's a squirting sport. Says something about our Navy, don't it? 58 years for Wade. George Edwards from Michigan. My God, he must be older than Bert. 67 years.
67.
Dave Fullaway from Hawaii. David got his start teaching hula dancing. Graduated to square dancing. 55 years. Betsy Gata from New Jersey. She's best known for her dad. 53 years. John Jones. Best known and often mistaken for the boxer, John Jones. Those of you that keep up with sports know what I'm talking about. From Texas for 60 years. Give me the stereo. Lee Cotman from New York. It is said that Lee thinks a lot of himself and knows everything about square dancing. The sad part about that, it is true. 58 years. Jim Mayo from New Hampshire, a historian of great proportion, and also another Yankee. 66 years. Jack O'Leary from Iowa. Jack had a big cornfield, cleared out a spot right in the middle of it for a dance hall or a dance floor. He said, if you build it, they will come. 66 years, 54 years. these get tough. Tak Osaki from Japan. They speak English better than I speak Japanese. I haven't been able to find out anything bad about you, so obviously from Japan. 51 years. Naru Okamura from Japan. Noted for his Harley Davidson collection, right? And his singing ability. 51 years. He's got an assistant who sings better than he does. Bob Pointer from Florida, noted for his everlasting tan. 52 years. Mike Seastrom. Anybody need dental work? California, 52 years. Masaru Wada from Japan. I still don't speak it. But he's a good picture taker, aren't you? 54 years. Johnny Wedge from New Hampshire. Where's Johnny?
Way back in.
Way in the back. 56 years, another damn Yankee. And me, myself, and I, Melton Luttrell. All right, this group.
Wait, how many years?
My wife and I started dating. I loved her because she knew how to honky-tonk dance at the American Legion building. And that lasted for 66 years. We started square dance calling the same year. Okay, that represents 1,070 years of calling this road show. In courage of all, I'm ad-libbing now as we speak. I was just thinking and looking to this crowd. Just supposing we all that are here tonight make another 10 years. Do you realize how many cumulative years of calling that'll be by then? It'll be fantastic. Tonight I'm pleased to award a half-century certificate to 3 other callers who have reached this momentous milestone. And let's introduce them as we speak. Mike Driscoll from Burnsville, Minnesota. Please come forward. You began calling in 1965. And here they come. Mike. Or as many as you like.
I'd just like to say this is a really great honor, and thank you, CALLERLAB, for having this for me. Thank you.
Chuck Orosky from Chicago, by Chicago, Illinois. Began calling in 1965. Now I'll tell you the deal here. Chuck has a little bit of trouble standing, but he's going to make it. He got a gimp in his leg this year. You got it?
Hello. Made it. The first thing I want to say is I want to thank all those people who wheeled me around this weekend, including my wife, who occasionally abandoned me. I found my way back. I can remember back in 1965 being, when I joined CALLERLAB, I was out in the backyard cutting grass, anticipating that maybe I would be invited, because in those days you had to be invited, you needed an invitation. And my mother came to the window and said, "Chuck, you got a letter from CALLERLAB," and she was right, and I could become a member. I appreciate that, and I certainly have enjoyed being with the group. There are 3 callers here today, although there are others back home, and the person that taught me how to dance, Ann Homan, taught me how to square dance and be a caller. But there are 3 people here, 3 callers that influenced me in different ways. The first caller was one that gave me the greatest high I ever had from square dancing. Back in 1975 at the airport in Kansas City, and a few months later in Chicago, this man called and I was floating in the air, and that was Mr. Lee Cotman. also wanted to mention another caller, and that's our retiring board champion, a man who I went to many of his seminars and learned a lot, to the point that we would bug him so much at clinics that he told me and my wife to shut up. And that was...
Hey, remember his name?
Yes, Jim Mayo. And the third person I want to mention is the one that showed me that square dancing is really dance. It's beautiful. It's marvelous to watch. Lloyd Shaw dancers emphasize that. And I want to mention Cal Campbell. The last thing I want to thank is the person that's very close to me, and my caretaker and wife, Becky. Thank you.
All set. Sounds good. Well, let's see what we got here. Oh, gee, I hate to do this one. Ed Foot from Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. Again, calling in 1965. Ed and I have been around the block a few times, and it got so tiring listening to his jokes. I finally just started saying, I'm going to give you a number, you tell that joke and quit. So each year when we meet, I say, this year I ask him for number 3, and he gives it just like that. Ed Foot.
Well, I want to say that there's no way that I could have survived in calling for 50 years without the ongoing and constant support of my wife, Marilyn. You know, people ask me, they say, well, what are your happiest moments in 50 years of calling? And I would have to say it's right here. Some of my happiest moments in square dancing have been as being a member of CALLERLAB, working with everyone in CALLERLAB, and being part of this organization and being here every year for the convention. You know, CALLERLAB a number of years ago, most of you know, square dancing would be down the drain without CALLERLAB when BMI and ASCAP wanted to impose taxes on the clubs that would have driven them out of existence. CALLERLAB stepped in and saved the day. And CALLERLAB continues to save the day for square dancing every year. Why are you in CALLERLAB? I submit you all are in CALLERLAB not for just getting a license or commenting on whether a call should be added or dropped from a list, or responding to a ballot on the internet. Ask yourself the question, why am I in CALLERLAB? What can I do for CALLERLAB, given all that CALLERLAB has done and is doing for square dancing? What can I do for CALLERLAB? And along this same line, we all know that the vast majority of all work in CALLERLAB is done by the committees. Many times, the committee chairmen are vastly overworked. They have a lot more on their plate than they can handle. And they have projects they would like to get accomplished, and they just physically don't have the time. Ask yourself, is there a chairman of a committee of my interest that I could help with whatever they need help with? Ask yourself, what is their purpose at CALLERLAB, and how can I help them achieve their purpose here? And of course, what I've just described as considering for CALLERLAB, isn't this a microcosm of life itself? Because in life itself, we are to find our purpose and then live it. And once we have done that, We are to determine the purpose of other people in life and help them live their purpose. And if you do this, if you discover your purpose in life and live it, and help other people discover their purpose in life and live it, then the circle will be unbroken, and the spirit of your dance will know perfection. Thank you.
Congratulations to you young men for achieving this milestone. There are 10 additional active CALLERLAB members who have earned this half-century award this year, and although they're unable to be with us, we would like to honor them by announcing that the fact that their certificates will be mailed to them immediately following this convention, and they are as follows, and the pronunciation may be shaky. Ray Brinze, or Ray Brinze from Canada. Cliff Bordeaux from Massachusetts. Murray Few from Canada. Wayne Jansen from California. Tom Kovacevic from Arizona. Raymond Muskowicz from Vermont, this close. Gil Porter from New York. Jeff Priest from Canada. Tony Russell from Iowa. And Ron Sawash from Nevada. If you happen to know any of these callers or run into them somewhere down the line, congratulate them the next time you see them. And with that, I thank you.
And along with our congratulations to our 50-year award certificates, congratulations also to their spouses, to Becky and to Sandy and to Marilyn. Especially to Marilyn, congratulations for putting up with Ed for all these many years. A nice round of applause for all of our recipients, please. It's pretty cool to be standing here, I got to tell you. I joined this organization when I was 19 years old. And I can remember sitting out there looking up at the gods of square dancing up here, and I thought, my word, I think I can just die and go to, I've already gone to heaven. I'm here already. And to be standing here all these years, well, the 3 years since then, to be standing here looking at this, and to look out here and see Malcolm out here, and he hasn't changed a lick in the last 3 years as I started here. It's absolutely amazing, and I am still in awe of my peers here at CALLERLAB. I want to tell you that. And moving along, I would like to take a moment to introduce our next presenter, who will be presenting the special award, and this will be from Barry Clasper. Barry is from Ontario, Canada, and he'll be introducing tonight's recipients of the Board of Governors Special Awards. Barry started calling in 1984, joined CALLERLAB 1992. This is his 16th convention. Barry is currently serving on the executive committee and is a chairman of the Board of Governors, and on a personal note, he's a really nice guy. Barry Clasper.
It's your speech. It's your speech.
It's just my speech
And your presentation.
and my presentation.
Yeah.
In order,
It says right here, I don't have to, Barry, you're on your own.
You have no idea how alarming that is when something's announced that I had no idea I was supposed to be doing that. Good evening. I have some papers here that I have to sort through. So, how many of you remember our Monday morning session? You know, like the one yesterday? So first, you remember when we went through our business with you, everybody stand up, you've been to attend conventions, sit down, and all that stuff, and we're left with the 3 men standing, except that there was only 2 men standing. Melton, he was the one that wasn't standing. So just so you realize that's who that was. So good job, Melton, we're really happy to hear you, have you here with us. Glad you could make it. Now, the other thing you may remember is that after the brainstorming session, I said a lot of stuff about what we were going to do. And, you know, there was going to be flip charts out there where you could go and comment on the best brainstorming ideas. And we're going to have stuff up on Facebook. And you may have noticed that that didn't happen. And there was a reason for that. We got so much stuff out of that session that we couldn't digest it in time to put flip charts and stuff out there and put it up on Facebook. I spent most of today in the office at my computer trying to load all that stuff in and make some sense out of it and get it ready to be perused. So I didn't quite make it. But I learned some interesting things. So I'm going to share them with you and then explain where we're going with this information. So the first thing I learned was that when you ask a bunch of square dance callers to line up against the wall, you better pack a lunch. Ain't going to happen quick. And the next thing I learned is that when you're giving people some instructions and you precede that with, now we want you to think out of the box, they assume that all the following instructions are in the box. So we got some really novel interpretations of the instructions as to how to fill in the cards and what you're supposed to put on them and that sort of thing. But we did get a lot of good information, which is going to take us a little while to digest. Today I just went through the cards that had some sort of ranking on them, so they were the ones that the team captains were running around the room. There were 83 ideas on those cards. Now, the stack of unranked stuff, so the ones that didn't make the cut at your table, was about 4 times thicker than the ranked stack. I didn't count them, but just judging by size, I'm guessing we got about 400 ideas. So that's a lot of material to get through. So my impressions from looking over the ranked stuff, it was kind of interesting. What we were hoping for out of the brainstorming session was that there would be 1 or 2 yowza ideas, you know, real silver bullet stuff that we could get the whole organization behind and we could create a project and we could get people working on different parts of it and sort of have a really exciting thing to move forward with. Didn't happen. There were no silver bullets, but there were a lot of nuggets, little ideas that can help you with various aspects of improving our activity. There were lots of ideas about marketing. There were lots of ideas about how we could teach dancers better, how we could teach callers better. And one of the things that I need to do to digest all this is to start to put some meaningful categories around that. And my wife Pam, who is trained as a librarian, I'm looking to her to help me with that. So I'm taking all these cards home. I bought a suitcase to put them all in. And I'm going to be spending the next couple of weeks after I get home digesting all that stuff. Once it's digested, my plan is we're going to put them in a database. And this is a database that hopefully we will continue, keep adding stuff to, that will be available on the CALLERLAB website. You'll be able to go there and say, I'm looking for ideas on marketing. You know, how could I maybe advertise what venues are available? And it would spew out a bunch of ideas that people came up with, not just ideas from the brainstorming session today, but from future operations that we might have, or things that we get out of the new initiatives program. So that's my plan. It's all very embryonic at the moment, but that's what you can look forward to. So my advice at this point is watch the CALLERLAB website, because there will be stuff appearing on there. When I say shortly, you know what CALLERLAB shortly means. But within your lifetime. And given the people that we just introduced, you know, that's not going to go there. So that's the update on the brainstorming session. So I just wanted to make sure you understood that, you know, that all that work that you did is not being lost. We're just trying to make sure that we leverage it as in the most effective way. Now I have the pleasure of presenting an award at this time. And we have among us unsung heroes. People who quietly go about getting the job done. People who do the necessary and often thankless work that's necessary to make our world go around. And in all walks of life, we experience that, whether it's your church group or things in your school. CALLERLAB is no different from any of those places. We have these people that we look to do this work. They don't make a big fuss over what they do. They don't look for accolades. They're the reliable ones. The ones that we turn to when we want to get something to happen, when we want something done. And we know who they are, because whenever we want something done, they're the ones that we turn to. But too often, because they seldom turn us down when we turn to them, too often we don't give them the recognition, I guess, is the word, that they deserve. We take them for granted, and yet they still keep doing stuff for us. They're special people. Now, one of the perks of being chairman is that there's a thing called the Chairman's Award that you can give to anybody you like for any reason you like. So tonight I'm going to use that opportunity to recognize one of these unsung heroes who's made some contributions to my life that I much appreciate. But I hope that by doing this, I'll get each of you to think about the unsung heroes that are around you and in your life, and the ones that do work that helps you out, and that maybe you'll be inspired to turn to them and say, thanks. Now, at the convention, when we give out these awards, is to try and keep you in suspense as long as possible, so that you can try and guess who the award recipient is. But as I get going, it'll be pretty hard to make that last very long. You'll recognize this person fairly quickly. So the person that I'm talking about is a member of a number of CALLERLAB committees, as you might expect, including the Challenge Committee, which I used to chair. I took over the chair of the Challenge Committee after Ed Foote had been in it for 30 years. You think that doesn't scare the hell out of you? I mean, I got to stay in this job for 30 years. Fortunately, I managed to convince Bill Ackerman to take it over in less than 30 years. Thank you, Bill. But this person was always one of my go-to people when I wanted some logical and objective analysis of something. Something that would be a dispassionate, logical view of what the situation was. And I know I wasn't the only committee chair that leaned on this person that way. But in addition to making contributions to the challenge programs, this person is an annual contributor to the Beginner Dance Party Leader Seminar, now known as the Community Dance Leader Seminar. By this time, she's starting to get an inkling of who I'm talking about. She is consistently enthusiastic about sharing a wealth of knowledge about teaching beginners, doing party nights, and prompting contras. She further contributes by editing the Community Dance Journal. Now she knows who she is. Don't let her leave the room. So by now, many of you know who she is, and she certainly knows who I'm talking about. She also chairs her own committee, which last year produced one of the most valuable books CALLERLAB has ever published, The Site and Module Resolution Systems. Now, many of you may not realize what an accomplishment that document is, because it's really a collection of input from some of the biggest egos, strongest holders of opinion in the world. And to wrangle them all together in one document is just an unbelievable feat. She was recently elected to the board. She's in her, is this your freshman?
Yeah.
So she's in her freshman term. I've already leaned on her in that capacity, and she helped me with a little project that the board just did. But her contributions to CALLERLAB are actually dwarfed by her contributions to the creator square dance community in general, particularly in Canada. She's been on the committees for 4 Canadian national conventions, and she's been the programming chair for 3 of them. Now, if you want some idea of what kind of a job the programming chair for a national convention is, go talk to Ken Ritucci. He's doing Springfield. And before he got that job, he used to have hair. She's the secretary of the Square and Round Dance Federation of Nova Scotia, for which she is also a past president. She's also the Halifax Metro Association. She edits the newsletter for the Association of Nova Scotia Square and Round Dance Teachers, as well as the Metro Matters newsletter for the Metro Association. She has been awarded a life membership in DANS, that's D-A-N-S, which is an acronym for Dance Nova Scotia. She was instrumental in producing a series of teaching DVDs and written materials to support the Dancing in the Schools initiative. She is the organizer and host coach for the All-Wire Collar School, held every 2 years in Nova Scotia. And oh yes, she's the current secretary of CALLERLAB. There's actually more, but this is only a 3-day convention, so I'm going to stop there. It's with great pride that I recognize Dottie Welsh, whether it's
I'm almost speechless. This is an unexpected honor, and I'm so pleased to accept it from all of you as friends. Thank you.
I'll meet you at the bar later, Dottie. It's time for my speech. I can tell you're all thrilled. Many years ago, when I was a young man, such a terrible young man, I was working in a data center on a Army base, spaceport, as the head of system software for this data center. And in those days, as the head of system software, I was one of the gurus, the wizards who ministered to these strange machines that were off in the back room. And we were regarded with some awe, which we enjoyed. And as head of system software, at this young age, I was pretty hot stuff. Pretty hot stuff. The guy I reported to, not so much. He was a superannuated service retread, had no experience in running a data center. Of course, I conveniently overlooked the fact that in those days, nobody had any experience running a data center. This was in the prehistoric days of data processing. And I watched him make a number of decisions which I felt were misguided, to use the polite word. Questionable from a technical point of view, because of course I knew more technical stuff than he did. Needless to say, I didn't hold him in high regard. One day, he called me into his office and explained that he was going to be away on an extended sick leave. And in fact, as it happened, he never came back. And he appointed me to be the acting superintendent of this data center. Isn't that a lofty title, superintendent of the data center? I always thought it made me sound like more like a janitor, but that was the title. I was acting superintendent. And this came as a surprise because I was the most junior section head in the data center. And I wondered, what he was doing. I thought, there's got to be a trick here. And in fact, there sort of was. He recognized that I had a few lessons to learn, and he put me in the place to learn them. And the first thing that I learned took me a few days, but after I sat behind that desk in the corner office with the nice windows behind me in the view, well, the view, not so much, because this was a data center that was sort of half sunk in the ground. So actually my window looked out at ground level. There was grass growing right in front of my window. And I could watch the squirrels and stuff run up and down the trees, but it's not like I had a vista. But anyway, when I sat behind that desk, I discovered that a lot of stuff looked kind of different from the other side of that desk. And things which I thought were kind of silly at the time now looked sort of wise. The old man might have known what he was doing after all. You know the old saying, how your father learns a lot between the time you're 16 and 25? Well, that's kind of what I was going through. A lot of things looked different from the other side of that desk. When I became chairman of CALLERLAB, a similar sort of thing happened. A lot of stuff looks different from the other side of that desk. And what I'd like to do tonight is share with you what some of the different perspectives are that I see from the other side of the desk. And my hope is that in doing so, it'll help you see some of the things in our world a little differently. So the first thing that... Somebody's trying to call a dance. That's okay, nobody heard a thing. The first thing that really dawned on me was the nature of the constraints that we, CALLERLAB, work under. The community, the entire social structure that we lump under the rubric of square dancing is undergoing a lot of pressure for change. We have a lot of concerns about the reducing number of dancers and the way that our activity is evolving. And CALLERLAB, while we deal primarily with callers, because our mission statement now, we have actually over the years earned a leadership position, a position of trust in the overall square dance community. But it's a position that we must continue to earn every single day. It's not a given that we have that leadership position. Because CALLERLAB is not a regulatory body or a governance body. Our only influence stems from the fact that people think maybe we've got some idea what we're doing, and that we're making decisions that they think maybe will, have the best outcome. They think we're mostly going in the right direction. We're not in a leadership position because we were appointed to it, we're elected to it, we weren't anointed with any special powers. The only reason we're in a leadership position is because other people choose to follow us. The next thing that became clear to me was that CALLERLAB is perhaps the only truly international square dance organization. Now there are other organizations that cross national boundaries, but typically what they're doing is they're gathering together some countries that are adjacent to one another into a single organization. And they usually have some sort of very specific geography that they tend to deal with. I think CALLERLAB is the only organization that says to any caller anywhere in the world, you can be a member. Now, if you think about those two facets, we've got membership from all over the world, and we have to keep creating and dispersing a general consensus of all the opinions in that world. That's a real challenge for CALLERLAB. On the one hand, our effectiveness and influence depend on being able to generate a consensus across this massively diverse community. And on the other hand, when we succeed in generating a consensus, because it's composed of worldwide opinions, it's a very powerful consensus. And that puts us in a unique position. Now, as an example of how this operates, Some of you aren't going to believe this when I start talking, but as an example of how this operates, I offer the recent discussion in the Advanced Committee about the call formerly named Half-Breed Through. I can see eyes rolling up already. In many quarters, the term half-breed is considered a racial epithet, but in other circles, it's not regarded as a pejorative. There have been several occasions over the past, 20 years, I think it's been, where the issue was raised with the Advanced Committee that many people found that term to be insensitive and that we should change the name of that call. But the Advanced Committee didn't come to any consensus that that was the right thing to do until this past, it was last year, wasn't it, Bill, that was passed? No, it wasn't last triennial review, it was last year, I think. When this last request came in, the consensus had changed. The committee went through a really spirited discussion. And you know what spirited is a code word for. It was, I won't say acrimonious, but it was very heated. There were many pro and con points presented. They were debated extensively. In the end, a vote was taken, and the decision was made to change the name of the call. But while the majority voted to change the name of the call, there was a very sizable minority that thought that was the wrong decision. But that was the vote, and the committee went with it. That's not the interesting part, though. The discussion was very contentious, and because of that, people on the Board of Governors also were concerned about it. And there was a sentiment on the board that maybe we're doing the wrong thing here. Maybe we should revisit this committee decision. Now, those of you who are more familiar with the arcane workings of CALLERLAB know that the idea of reversing a committee decision is virtual heresy. You just don't do that. But nevertheless, the board had a discussion about the validity of this kind of decision and whether it made sense and whether it was going to reflect badly on CALLERLAB. That's really what the board was concerned with. The board went through a discussion which turned out to be a virtual mirror of the discussion that happened in the committee. Same points were raised, even though people on the board hadn't followed the actual discussion in the Advanced Committee, or at least not all of them had. Same arguments came out, same points were raised, same consensus emerged. It's time to change the name of this call. So then it was published. Exactly the same thing happened in the general public. There were discussion groups and discussion boards went nuts. And there were all kinds of discussions about why are they changing the name, and others saying, well, they're changing the name to be sensitive to the people who find it offensive. And again, it was a really heated, and in the general public, it did get kind of acrimonious at times. But what was interesting was, watching that, the same exact thing happened. As the arguments went forward, I didn't see one single point brought up that hadn't been brought up in the committee originally. All the same arguments happened in the same kind of way, and the same consensus emerged. So the result was that the Advanced Committee had very effectively reflected the general community consensus at that time. So what that tells me is we actually have a good mechanism for gathering a consensus that reflects what the real consensus in our square-dance community is. Now, the CALLERLAB made this decision. The general consensus in the community was that, yes, we should change the name. But there's still this sizable minority that thinks it's the wrong decision. And they're quite vocal about it. In fact, if you want to start a fight at the dance, just bring this up. You're bound to get somebody going at it. However, the interesting thing is that while there's still some low-grade grumbling out there, which is the way I refer to it, for the most part, people have accepted the decision as reflecting the majority opinion. It was arrived at and seemed to be arrived at, and that's really important, through an open democratic process. which removes much of the wind from the sails of people who disagree with it. They may disagree with it, but they realize that most of the majority does not. So to me, this is a powerful indication that our current mechanisms work. Now, let's talk about democracy a little bit. Our community is a democracy. Not just CALLERLAB, but the whole square dance community. Our community, our activity is no more nor no less than what we say it is. It's really just the aggregate of all the decisions and the actions that the community as a whole takes. In a political representative democracy, which now there's a number of systems represented in this room from various countries, but they're all forms of a democracy, where you elect representatives, they legislate laws, and if you decide you're not going to observe those laws, there are penalties. Now in our activity, CALLERLAB can make a decision, dissenting individuals can just decide they're not going to pay attention. And there's really nothing we can do about it. Because we're not a governing body. No jail or fines will result. Now Winston Churchill had a couple of interesting quotes about democracy. I've always liked Churchill because he was born on my birthday. I guess I was actually born on his birthday. The first and probably the most famous is that democracy is the worst form of government, except for all the others. And actually, for those of you who are history freaks, that's sort of a paraphrase of what he actually said. If you look at Hansard in England, the words are a little different, and he was actually quoting somebody else at the time. But he didn't have any illusions about what democracy is really like, because another one of his quotes is, "The best argument against democracy is a 5-minute conversation with the average voter." He knew that democracy is a messy, tedious, time-consuming job, but in the end, it's worth it. It's better than all the others. And messy, tedious, and time-consuming it may be, but our activity is a democracy. CALLERLAB is possibly the primary organ of that democracy, because we have the worldwide reach. We gather and redistribute information and opinion from around the world and provide a vehicle to forge all those diverse opinions into a collective group consensus so that we can take collective action that everybody supports, or that at least most people support. We focus on callers and the art of square dance calling, but of course we have to be cognizant of the wider square dance world and indeed the wider dance world. So we should also be paying attention to what's happening to other forms of dance like contra and line dancing and round dancing and all the others that are similar to us or have roots that are the same as ours. We provide an influential voice in shaping the affairs of that entire community. That means that it's important that we do that well. We have to get democracy right. Now sometimes as you wrangle through an issue in one of our committees, it can be hard to remember that it's important that we get democracy right. It's easy to become angered by the fact that the person you're talking to is a horse's ass. Refuses to see sweet reason. It's easy to become discouraged because he has silly opinions. And it's easy to be frustrated by having to accommodate his issues that aren't important to you. But that's what democracy is about. This brings me back to perspective, the view from the other side of the desk. We are the quintessential democracy. We are a real, pure democracy. So it's important that we consider all points of view. We have a lot of points of view from all corners of the world. And of course, not all points of view are created equal. Some people have more information or better information than others. Some people are more insightful or more thoughtful than others. Some people are better communicators than others. And some people are just crazy. So what does this mean for us? Our continued success to maintain this leadership position depends on the larger community believing that overall we are acting in their best interests. They must trust that our decisions and positions result from a process that integrates all these varied opinions from around the world to form a general consensus. The process must be one that persuades most people the consensus position is the best available, and also persuades the dissenters, it's getting hard to talk, that the consensus represents the majority position. I believe that we have that mechanism now. The half-breed through controversy is a good illustration of how a contentious discussion resolved into a consensus. It's true that there was a large cohort of dissenters, and many of them are still quite vocal in their disagreement. Very few of them, however, have totally ignored the committee decision. Some are using the new name, some grumble while using the new name, some refuse to use the call, which actually is the same as before they changed the name. It's never been a favorite call of most of the callers. Some inform their dancers about the new name so they won't be blindsided at a convention and then continue to use the old name themselves. But by and large, they recognize that after an extensive discussion, a majority has spoken. So we have the mechanism, but it could work better. During the half-breed through discussion, many good points were made, but it's not clear to me that many minds were changed as a result of those points being made. We as a species are not great at listening to dispassionate argument and forming an opinion based entirely on reason, especially those horses ass people. We generally bring some predispositions or emotional baggage that skew our thinking one way or another. We then tend to listen most closely to supporting information and discount or ignore contrary information. The psychologists call this confirmation bias. And it's big in the popular press these days. Last year, John Jones and I hosted a Birds of a Feather titled Dance Programs Working Together. The premise was that to make progress, we have to do a better job of working together, which requires that we do a better job of understanding each other's points of view and have more productive discussions. On your flash drive, you'll find that there's a handout named Agreeable Disagreement. And actually, they put it in your package, at least I had it in my package. And you may wonder why that was there. Well, that was my handout for this Birds of a Feather that John and I did. And it was, in itself, was kind of an abstract of a much larger document that somebody else wrote. And if you look in the paper that was in your package, you'll see a pointer to where you can read the whole document if you want. So it was an abstract, and here I'm going to further abstract a couple of important points. The first principle when you're discussing something with somebody else is to curb your cynicism. If you believe that the other person is operating from nefarious motives or is trying to deceive you in some way, don't just assume that as a given from the beginning. Give them the benefit of the doubt until they give you some evidence that in fact maybe they're not operating totally above board. Second is acknowledge that the other person has a point of view. You have a point of view and they have a point of view. And what you're trying to do by discussing things, you're trying to change their point of view, which means you have to know what it is. You need to listen to what they say and try and understand how they're getting there. How is it that they have that point of view? Conversely, the other person has to know your point of view, because that's the context that they have for understanding what you're proposing. If they don't know what the background is behind your position, then to them it might just look crazy or silly or all those other words that we tend to ascribe to the other person. So describe it to them clearly and unemotionally. And finally, and I think the most important principle is, when you're faced with a compelling argument and you say to yourself, way in the back of the secret recesses of your mind, damn, he's right. Recognize when that happens that conceding the other person's point of view, the other person's argument, is not a weakness. It's a strength. Understanding another person's point of view and realizing that it has more validity than your point of view isn't losing, it's learning. That's how we make progress. Last year, we reframed our mission statement to foster the art of square dance calling. Say along with me. To foster the art of square dance calling and improve caller skills. How do we do that? Well, we have many initiatives, structures, and committees that do things like maintain the program list and definitions, document teaching methods, and establish caller training curricula. But I believe the most important thing that we do is we gather information, we forge a consensus for a democratic decision, and we disseminate that consensus back out to the community so that the wider community knows what we're all thinking. And by we, I don't mean us here in this room, I mean the community as a whole, because we're the ones that are most plugged in to that community and all its far-flung tendrils. And if we take that role seriously, it means that when we discuss things with one another and when we argue, we have to work to be the very best at it that we can. So think about that when you're having discussions and when you're discussing things with other people, try to come to a good common consensus. Now, in closing, I would just like to say that I'd like to thank those who have helped and supported me during my term as chairman. I had the privilege of working with two outstanding VCs. I'd like to recognize Betsy Gotta. You don't really have to stand up, just wave. Betsy Gotta, Ken Ritucci, Eric Kennerlaw, Tim Mariner, John Marshall, and Deborah Carroll Jones, who were all in one or the other of both of those ECs. Thanks so much for your hard work and your support. There's no way that the chairman gets anything done without those folks pitching in, and really they carry most of the load. I'd like to also thank the Board of Governors that I had the privilege to lead. In the interest of brevity, I won't list all their names. You've heard them all here tonight anyway. And especially thanks to the Home Office and Dana Shermer. Oh, there he is, Dana over in the corner. Literally, you folks have no idea. This organization literally would not run without Dana and the Home Office crew. They're what make it go. We make suggestions of what we'd like to have happen, and they go away and make it happen. But finally, and most of all, I'd like to thank my sounding board, my wife's consultant, the person on whose shoulder I cry, love of my life, my wife Pam. I couldn't do it without you. And you'll be pleased to hear that's the end.
We have just a few more things, and that'll launch us into our last hour here. And the first is to recognize a recognition of an overlooked board member. We need to make that correction right off the bat. Not only an excellent board member, but former executive director of CALLERLAB, and that would be Jerry and Del Reed. Please stand and be recognized. And a nice round of applause for Jerry and Del Reed. While you are in the applauding booth, we want to take a moment to introduce our incoming chairman of the board, Vernon Jones. So a nice round of applause for Vernon, please.
Thank you, buddy. A few weeks ago, Dana contacted me and asked if I would say a few words about Barry Clasper, and I said, sure, I'll be happy to say as few words as I possibly can about Barry Clasper. I said I'd much rather talk about Pam. She's a whole lot more interesting than Barry is. He said no. I said, well, is there something I can say about Barry? I don't know, something along the lines of, and I said, oh, I know, he's the first and only chairman from Canada. And Dana said, well, no, that Tim Crawford was the first chairman from Canada. And I said, well, that tenure was easily forgettable, so we can just go ahead and say it. We can go ahead and use that. And Dana said no, and therefore I can't. There's not a single person in this room that cares more about our activity or this organization than this gentleman. There's not a single person in this room that works harder for this activity or this organization than this gentleman. There's not a single person in this room that will continue to care or work hard for this activity or this organization than this gentleman. Therefore, on behalf of the Board of Governors, the Executive Committee, and the Home Office staff, please join me in welcoming, and in congratulating for a job very well done, Chairman Barry Klassman.
You know, that's a better ovation than I usually get when I call. Maybe I'll just read that speech at my next convention. Thank you very much.
To offer any last-minute changes to our schedule and special announcements, ladies and gentlemen, your Executive Director, here is Dana Shermer.
Good hand, everybody, leave it, please, on the MC tonight. As always, we'd like to ask that the presenters and the recipients of awards please meet over on my left-hand side for last-minute photos. Also, I've been asked to ask that the women in calling, if they would stay, if they would like to get a photo of the women in calling here this week. Also, a photo of the GCA members that are here this week. If you'll stay, we'll have a photo for you. If there's anyone not included in that group, there will be a dance starting next door in Colorado. It's a country western dance tonight. This is the first for quite a while. I don't think we've had it in quite a while. But a country western dance hosted by Mike Salerno, and it's country western dancing. So go have some fun. There will be an open bar there, so help yourself. And with that, the annual meeting, we should point out, the annual meeting tomorrow morning will start at 9 o'clock in Colorado, next door. So, if you're doing the country western dance, please leave the hall in one piece. All right, thank you all. We hope you have a good evening, and thank you for being here.